I would encourage the men of our society to do what it is in your nature to do: protect and provide. Protect society. And you don't need women's permission to do that, right? The women are protecting the children. They're doing their best in a lot of situations. But we need more men to start speaking out. We need more men to start to stand up and protect society, because we're in a war and we need warriors. We need warriors to protect us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for watching Juji-interviews interviews. Today, I have a very special guest. I will be discussing with Gabrielle Clark, also known as Gabs. She fights indoctrination in the K-12 education setting. Both of her school-age children were affected by indoctrination. One was harmed by CRT, the critical race theory, while the other was harmed by SEL, social emotional learning. This led her to fight these theories used for indoctrination. Thank you for joining us today, Gabs.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you? How's everything? How's your family?
We're doing well. We're doing well. The fight is going well.
That's great. That's great. So, Gabs, I came across your Twitter account, and then I saw your story. I was attracted to it when I saw that you had your own daughter go through the trans ideology cult. And as per your own tweet, your daughter believed that she was a boy. She was captured by the trans cult, and as a response, you created a program to pull her out of the gender ideology. And now you help other parents to help their children out of this cult. So could you share with us, how did it start, and when was the moment you realized your daughter had been indoctrinated?
Well, like with most parents, we didn't know anything was going on with the schools until the lockdowns. And with the lockdowns, I started seeing things that I didn't think that was appropriate for school. And so that caused me to look into things further. We ultimately ended up having to sue my son's school for discrimination. But while I was fighting for my son, my daughter was being socially transitioned to believing that she was a boy. And this, of course, is not true. So as I really started to pay attention to the changes in her behavior, she was exhibiting behaviors that were uncharacteristic to her. She had always been such a loving and caring person. And when she started to behave abnormally, and she was unkind and snarky and sarcastic and nihilistic and all of these things, a lot of self-deprecating remarks and that sort of thing, I really got concerned about it. But at the same time, I thought maybe this is the way that children are going to behave after the lockdowns, because they were so isolated. So I was concerned. But when we went to visit a family member who didn't have the internet, I noticed that my daughter went back to her usual self. And so I was like, what is going on? After about a month away from the internet and her friends and her school, she just went back to normal. And that piqued my interest. So when we went back home and she got back on her devices and started hanging out with her friends, the behaviors resumed. The uncharacteristic behaviors resumed. But when she started back to school, that was when more troubling things started happening, self-harm, cutting, and that sort of thing.
Wow.
And she was having emotional outbursts and distancing herself from her family. And that was when I realized, okay, this is not just social media. This is not just peer pressure. There's something going on with your school. And I started paying a lot more attention to what was going on. And when I heard an administrator use a boy's name when talking about her, that was when I said, okay, I have to do something. I have to do something.
So you started seeing changes in her behavior. She wasn't acting the way she normally acted. And of course, we still don't know the repercussions of the lockdowns and everything young children and teens went through during the lockdowns and the so-called online schools. And what you're saying, it's really worrying, that sometimes we just take for granted our children's education, and we don't look into what they're seeing in school. We don't get interested. Sometimes we just rely on the education systems, but many parents are unaware of what's going on. And I think this is like a wake-up call for many parents, that we should be more interested and more concerned about what our children are learning and what they're being fed in the public schools, especially. And just to share a little bit with you, the same is going on around the world. I live in Spain, and also the public schools, they are contaminated, with all these theories, all this indoctrination. And my son, he's only 5, but we keep sure, me and my wife, we keep sure, we ask him, and when he has brought up a few issues. He's only 5. He's in the 4 years classroom. He's just, his birthday is early, but they're only 4-year-old, most of them, and they have been already exposed to a few things. So we have to be very careful. And I thank God that you were able to notice that things were changing with your daughter and also your son. So could you explain, in your website, you say you help other parents, so that their children go into Desistance. Can you briefly explain what Desistance means?
Yes. So when there is a medical transition, if someone undergoes a medical transition, meaning if they take wrong sex hormones or they take puberty blockers, that's called a medical transition. And some of the people who realize that they made a mistake, they stop taking the hormones, that is called a detransitioner, right? But if you've never taken any medicalization, if you've never been medicalized, but you're socially transitioned, meaning you go by a different name, you use the wrong sex pronouns, those sort of things, that's called social transitioning. And we don't use detransition for that, because that's basically just a surface area transition. So we call that desistance when those people stop with their social transition. So my daughter never medicalized. I would never let that happen. She was socially transitioned, but social transition is the gateway for medicalization. So I help parents pull their children out of the social transitioning. I help them parent their children into desistance, just like I did for my own daughter. At affirmingreality.com, you can see some of the things that I helped my daughter with, and some of the things that I was able to help her with. I created a webinar last year so that I could describe and break down the steps that I implemented in the program for my own daughter. And that webinar is being used all over the world right now to help parents encourage their children to desist. Unfortunately, some of the parents were not able to really understand the process, because it does get more complicated than a 3-hour long webinar. So in response to that, I created a coaching service at affirmingreality.com where I go through individual families, and we have individual sessions on a particular situation, or I coach them and I advise them on how to navigate through what I call parallel language messaging. So parallel language messaging is the unusual way that the thought process behind everything. So we navigate through the DARVO, we navigate through the gaslighting, we navigate through the word salads and word cyclones, and all of the logical fallacies that they use to try to pull our children in and teach them how to manipulate us into believing that they're born in the wrong body. I help parents understand that. I help them learn more about their children and ways to understand their children better and ways to navigate through this, so that their children, that they can talk to their children and their children will come to the realization that they need to live in reality and the wrong body.
That's amazing. And a couple of things I want to say about that is that first, we will get into your website, Affirming Reality, shortly. And secondly, that is an interesting name, parallel language, because most of this, it's a battle of language, okay? So
Right.
it's the first part, I believe, is changing the way we speak. So
Right.
it all started, you know, like with pronouns, with the way you address people. And now the part that is more serious and should be more concerning to everyone is that this is being enforced. They're using state, they're using authorities, they're using the government to enforce and to control the way you speak. This is
Right.
very dangerous. This is a type of Marxism or fascism that basically tells you what you can say and what you cannot say. And even though the truth and reality is one thing, you are forced to say otherwise. This
Yes.
is concerning.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I actually really help the parents understand, because a lot of parents don't understand what it is they're seeing or what it is they're hearing, because the manipulation of the language has made them incapable of communicating with people who are woke. So when we talk about, and like you said, they utilize the force of the government to force us into capitulation of this manipulated language. And so, like, for instance, when I discovered what was going on with my daughter, I immediately realized that I was going to have to leave the environment that I was in, because if I didn't, they would deem me an unsafe person, quote unquote, unsafe. Well, unsafe, parents are the safest space for their children, with the exception of a few instances of child abuse, in which case you should report that to the local authorities if there is child abuse. But now they're saying that if you don't affirm your child, which is another level of parallel language messaging, that
Correct.
flowery language, gender affirming care, it sounds great, right? But it's very ominous. So when we talk about parallel language messaging and we talk about being deemed unsafe by the administrators and the educators and medical professionals, what we're really saying is that they're de facto saying that we're abusing our children because we won't affirm their fantasy, we won't affirm their delusion. And that is completely asinine. The manipulation of the language has been one of the most difficult battles to engage in, because most people do not understand how it works. And I help the parents understand how it works.
That's right. They don't understand how it works, and sometimes they are unable, or they don't have the tools to fight in that realm. They are not capable of engaging, knowing what they're facing, and then addressing it correctly. So it's all a manipulation of the language, and as you say, it's turning your children against you as a parent. You know, it's horrible what they're doing. And in Canada, I'm sure you're aware, if you
Yes.
don't affirm, so-called affirm, the state can take your children from you, and that is
It
insane.
happens in the United States as well. It's happened in California. This is what prompted me to come forward. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed because this happened to my daughter, and I was already fighting indoctrination, and it still happened to one of my kids. So I was embarrassed and ashamed. But when I heard the story of Abigail Martinez in California, whose daughter was taken away, she was put on testosterone, and she subsequently stepped on a train 3 years after she was taken away from her mother. That prompted me to come forward because I felt like, you know what? I have answers for parents. I have solutions for parents, and it would be wrong for me um, to not share that with the rest of society. So that was why I created Affirming Reality, so that I could share what I had learned, the trial and error, because it wasn't a magic, thing. It took months. It took months for me to figure out what worked and what didn't. And I wanted to be able to share the things that were working with parents, and also explain to them why some things were not going to work. Some things that
Wow.
that you think that would be enough, but because of the parallel language messaging, that they were able to turn it around on us. And so I was able to teach them the things to do, but also the things not to do.
That's right. That's right. And I have seen, I'm sure Jordan B. Peterson. He's a Canadian psychologist. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I've
He's
heard
following me on
him.
Twitter.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. And I also have there's also actually a book writer from Argentina. I speak Spanish, so he shares, part of what Jordan B. Peterson speaks about. So there's something very important that he says. After a few years, when our children, are grown-up people, they're adults, they will ask, Father, Mother,
Wow.
what were you doing? What were you
Yes.
doing when this was happening? Children,
Right.
we need to speak up, because we
Right.
will be held accountable by future generations. They will ask us, and we will be able to say, son, daughter, I was doing all I could. I was doing everything I could to fight this back. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And now let's get into affirming reality. And before we go into it, you mentioned CRT, critical race theory, and SEL. Can you briefly define what this means and how this is being used to indoctrinate children?
Critical race theory is a collection of theories that describe why systemic racism is rampant in America. Basically, it's innocuous in its allegations, but the implementation in the praxis of K through 12 education has been deemed very harmful to children. It creates a sort of classism, racism, race essentialism, and it divides children through intersectionality, and causes a friction and a rift, but where there was none before. We used to teach people to accept everyone as they are, and try your hardest and work hard and do your best, and believe in American exceptionalism, as patriotic. But now with critical race theory, it basically is teaching children that depending upon what family you're born into, and the color of your skin or your religious beliefs or your sexual preferences, then that's going to determine how far you go in life. And that is completely and totally asinine. You know, everyone has opportunities in America, and excuse me, it's not always fair, but life is never always fair. And just like some people have advantages and other people have disadvantages, there, you know, there are avenues in which to overcome disadvantages here in America. That's why people come here. That's why people want to be here, for the opportunities that they can get exposed to here. So I felt like that was inappropriate to be in schools, as a lot of parents do. A lot of people are seeing the harm in this, and they're rejecting it. I definitely think that these ideas need to be discussed, but they need to be discussed in the right area. So it's a class that they offer in law school, which is the appropriate venue for these discussions. We don't throw a cadaver on the table and hand a 5-year-old a scalpel and say, hey, go get that liver for me. We don't do that. You know what I mean? That's something you do in medical school, right? So these kinds of concepts need to be discussed, but they need to be discussed in the proper venue.
That's correct. So you actually filed the first federal lawsuit against K-12 for this indoctrination. So can you tell us or walk us through a little bit of the process of the lawsuit, and if there is any ruling so far, what's the status right now?
Well, the lawsuit has since been resolved. And there were some accommodations. There were accommodations made for our family. My son was being asked to list his identities and then attach the signifier of privileged or oppressed to those identities. And because my son is white, Judeo-Christian value, straight male, then, well, at the time, that was what was assumed. Then he would just be privileged. But at that time, I was recovering from a serious injury, and we were homeless. We were living in a motel in Las Vegas, and my son was sleeping on a mat on the floor. My husband had died when my son was only 1 year old, and so how in the world could someone that lived such a hard life be privileged in any way? And the way that his identities intersect, all would have placed him as a privileged person. And that is completely and totally wrong. It is wrong to judge people based on their immutable characteristics or their belief systems. And so, we fought back. So it would have been just as wrong to apply something like that to myself. Because if you look at all of the ways that my identities intersect, then I'm just oppressed. Well, I'm not oppressed. I'm an American. I'm an American. There's limitless opportunities in America. And it's not always easy. And it's a lot of the times it's tough and it's difficult. But, I was homeless a couple of years ago, and now I own my own home. Now I own my own home by the beach. There are limitless possibilities in America. So
thank God for that.
Yes. But, my son was allowed to graduate, and, like I said, we're comfortable now. But
that's great.
I encourage parents to file lawsuits when their children's civil rights are being violated. I help them find lawyers so that they can fight back. We need to fight this on every level. And lawfare has been a very, very effective tool in fighting back against indoctrination.
That is true. It relates to what we were just discussing, that we need to fight back. We need to take every measure possible to address this issue, to fight it, to get rid of this sugar-coated language that is confusing, you know, our children. And what you're saying, it's shocking. Let me share with you, I am not from Spain, but I've been living here in Spain. Okay, I'm from Venezuela. We escape from my country because of things that we're seeing now. And for me, my family, my wife, it is shocking that the Spanish society, the American society are just seeing how their country is being torn apart, and they're doing nothing. Of course, not the majority, but many, they just remain silent. They close their eyes. And we are shocked, you know, that no one is looking at this and realizing what's going on. We already saw this happen in our country, where you could not say what you wanted to say. Your speech was controlled. The police would come to your house for tweeting out something, for saying something, for criticizing the government. And for us, it's mind-blowing that, you know, many people, they just remain silent, or they are part of, you know, that society that has been ostracized for speaking out, for criticizing what's going on. So many, they don't want to join that part, or many, they prefer to remain quiet. Oh, I don't want to be called this. I don't want to be called this phobe or this racist. So it's horrible what we're seeing, because we already saw this happening in our own country. That's the reason I'm not in my country anymore. And I don't want that future for Spain. I don't want that future for America. My mother, she lives in the US. She lives in Florida. My sister lives there too. My nieces and my nephew, they're there. And I'm afraid of everything what's going on in public schools. I talk to them every day. And my sister-in-law, she told me that in my nephew's school, there are a few activities, that so-called after-school activities. And there is one LGBTQ after-school group. What does that even mean? How is this helpful to children?
The Gay and Straight Alliance has been, the Gay and Straight Alliance at schools has been instrumental in indoctrinating our children into believing in queer theory. And that is also one of those areas that we have been actively fighting against. And I will say that I think that a great deal of the country is starting to really wake up. In the southeast portion of America, we've already, in every state in the southeast portion of America, from Texas to Florida, we have all banned gender affirming care for minors in some fashion. So that really does show that more people are starting to wake up. And with the major corporations, the major retailers doing too much as far as equity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and trying to implement queer theory into their stores and into their businesses, and disseminating this to the public. The public has reacted. The public has responded. And there have been course corrections within corporations, retailers. So, I mean, and I have to say too that the immigrant population has really been instrumental in fighting back against this. People who have come from other countries like Venezuela, like Cuba, like China, and places in Africa and the Middle East, they have said, hey, what are you doing? We left our countries because we didn't have freedoms. And now you are trying to go in the same directions as the countries that we just left. They have exercised their rights as new Americans to fight for their freedoms that they were denied in their home countries. And I am very grateful for that.
That is true. That is true. The same is happening here. And I thank God that part of the society is waking up. I think there's something called, I think it's called the spiral of silence, where, you know, people keep quiet about certain topics because they are afraid of being called slurs, or they're afraid of being labeled as racist, homophobe. And this is part of the same language manipulation, that if you don't agree, if you don't follow what we believe, then you are a hateful person, you want everyone to die, you just hate them for their existence, which is another type of manipulation. Okay, so coming to your website, Affirming Reality, how did you develop this plan? Did you have any reference guide before you start, or do you just continue with trial and error?
It was trial and error. A lot of it was instinct, though. And I think that, part of what I do at Affirming Reality is to encourage parents to hone in on their natural instincts, because we've been taught to ignore our instincts because our instincts are wrong. But I think that does a disservice to humanity. And I think that does a disservice to humanity in lots of other areas as well. But I've encouraged parents to, if there is something that is amiss and they have a sense that something is amiss, then they need to investigate and find out exactly what it is that they're seeing, and try to define it, and try to analyze it so that they can work to fix it. And so a lot of it was trial and error. I mean, I did try different things to figure out how to help my daughter. And I realized that I came to the realization that some things were going to work with other people, but some things just weren't going to work at all. And so there was a lot of, a combination of things. I also had help from family. Extended family had become very important in our journey to help my daughter desist, because we had to have a group of people to really let my daughter understand that what she was experiencing was not real, and to encourage her to really understand what real life is like. And so the extended family was very, very helpful with that. And I encourage people who are trying to parent their children into desistance to solicit the help of grandmas and aunties and uncles and papas to really pops to really reach out to their children's hearts and say, when we were young, this is what we had to overcome. These are the things that we had to struggle with, so that the children of today can understand that they're very blessed and they're very privileged to live in the society that they live in, and to try to give them a sense of what the future can hold, even if you can't see the possibilities yourself. If you just try hard and you work hard and you go out there and do things, make them better, then ultimately the chances of them getting better are a lot better for you.
That is true.
Yes.
That is
so,
true.
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
So at Affirming Reality, all of these things that I experienced with my daughter and her experiences as well, I try to explain how and why these things will work and why these things won't work as they come up with each individual family. Some of the things have been, just across the board, they work every time. And a lot of the times the parents, once they get into the groove of it, then they are able to rely on their own instincts, and they're able to see how some of the parenting ideas that we had before were not as helpful as we thought, particularly as it pertains to technology. We all thought that putting a cell phone in our kids' hands was going to make them safer, and we're now seeing that that's not the case. Lots of kids have been harmed by social media and unfettered access to the internet. And I teach parents to really look at what it is that they're letting their children be exposed to, and putting parameters on that access, or taking away that access altogether without their presence. Depending upon how old the child is, that that determines what kind of access they have to cell phones or devices that are internet capable. And that has made a huge, huge difference in this fight.
That's correct. We have also, especially younger parents, we have relied on technology, and it's all for our own convenience. We say,
Right.
oh, we can give our child a tablet, we can give them an iPad, we can give them a cell phone. Oh, and you can have fun, you can scroll through your phone, you can watch TV, you can eat in peace, but at what cost?
That's
At
right.
what cost? What is the cost of comfort? You're comfortable because you are at peace, you are enjoying whatever you're doing, but in exchange of what exactly? Do you really know what's going on that screen? Do you really know what they're looking at? I think this is very critical. The access to screens, we have to make a balance. Sometimes, I think sometimes there's no other resort. You have to give the child some sort of entertainment, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a screen, but
Right.
sometimes you need a time to pause. But
Right.
at the same time, we have lost, especially young parents, we have lost our ability, and we have ceded our role as parent. You as a parent, your role is parenting, and that means entertaining your child, playing with them, and not relying on a screen. The extended family, I love that name. That is crucial. And part of what I was saying about, how comfortable we are now, I think that is also a major part of it. Why? Let me tell you something about Spain. Many people and adults now, they have sent their parents to foster caring homes. We have divided our family when in previous generations and in my country, family would stay together. Every member of the family, every member of the extended family had a role to play. Grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts. But somehow we are now believing that getting away from our parents, sending them to live with other elderly people and being taken care by strangers is somehow progress, is somehow good. But I think we will realize that this is not comfort, this is not good. Of course, there will be exceptional cases, as you mentioned earlier, where there's abuse and you don't want to live with relatives who are abusive. But in general, previously, each member of the family had a role. All the masculine figures, all the father figures would be crucial to the development of boys, and female roles, female figures would be crucial for the development of girls. They learn so many things. Many younger generations, they don't know how to fix anything, they don't know how to change a tire because they have never been exposed to this. We believe in this is something I personally try to address with my wife. You know why? Because we live in a developed country, we had a different childhood, so now we have our son, and he is deprived from scarcity, from struggling, what we had to deal with. And I tell my wife, there is something we have to do about this, because when we are so comfortable now, he's never facing scarcity of food, scarcity of things, being denied, like we cannot buy this, we cannot buy that the same way we did. And I want my son to learn that you have to take effort in everything you do. And part of it is it's the extended family. Unfortunately, my parents, my father, he passed away, and my mother, she's living in the US. Luckily, my family's relatives, most of them are here. So we make sure my mother-in-law, she lives with us and she's helping us, you know. She goes to school to pick up my son, and now in the morning, she's also taking him there. We get to share with his grandpa. We get to share with his uncles. We try to, you know, let them have their relatives close and they can share. We all try to get together for activities to eat, because this was important when we were growing. And we need to make sure that our children are exposed to, because these will give them, you know, bravery. These will give them some type of character, that they know that difficult times will come. But
Yeah.
if you take a step, if you take action and you don't run away from it, you face it, you can overcome it.
Right. I mean, the extended family offers so much. Extended, and I will tell you, you know, another aspect of this that we really didn't understand as much as we do now. You know, it's important for us as a society to have abuelita sitting there with a chancleta ready to, you know what I mean, ready to tell it like it is, right?
That's right. That's right. It's true.
There's a discipline. There's a discipline, and a history and a heritage and legacy that our children need to understand. And because we are burdened with excess. We're burdened with the excess. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why our children are overweight. That's one of the reasons why they, you know, don't understand what the purpose of hard work is. This is something that I have had to really instill in my daughter, the purpose of hard work and the purpose of doing things that don't seem to really matter, like making your bed or striving to make the best grades that you can. All of those things you teach them to your children, but they're reinforced by previous generations' experiences of why they had to work so hard. And the reasons why they had to work hard may not be the reasons why our children have to work hard, but it's still necessary. So the previous generations had to work hard so that they wouldn't starve. You know, our generation, our children are going to have to work hard so that they stay healthy, so that they keep their minds active, so that they can continue to pass down generational wealth to their own children. These are the things that we've had to adjust our parenting techniques onto our own children, and having a generational household really does help with that, along with that chocolate.
Of course. That is something that I've also shared with my wife. I remember when I was a kid, or maybe I was a teen, that we heard in my country about children in the US, that they were taught in schools that if your parent somehow disciplined you, you could call 911. So I think it's part of, you know, the same path that schools somehow have appropriate parenting roles, stealing them from parents. Let me share something else with you about the public schools in Spain. And this is something I tell my wife, that in favor of equity, that we are all being forced into the same thing. So my son, they have a plan for daily breakfast. Okay, so of course, this is all sugar coated in good intentions, and we want to make sure that the children have a balanced diet, which it's okay to a certain extent. But in that effort, all parents are being told on Monday, this is what they're going to eat. On Tuesday, this is what they're going to eat. And I tell my wife, what's going on? We as parents, we know what's good for our children. We know what's best for them. We are the ones who decide what they eat. Now, what I mean when I talk about equity is that because few exceptional cases of parents who do not take care or do not make sure that their children have a balanced diet, then that is being used by the state, by the government, through public schools to force everyone then to follow a program designed by a bureaucrat. And it's not mandatory here. My wife tells me, well, it's not mandatory. I know it's not mandatory, but it would be if we do not fight it. I have a friend in Argentina, and she said, in Argentina, it is mandatory. You cannot give your children your own lunch. You cannot give them something you made at home for them to eat at school. So this is a sign, and it's part of the same path that schools, actually governments, through the schools, have been taking away roles that also parents, we have ceded to the government and to schools, probably unconscious, but now we realize that this is not the way, this is not the way forward. This is not doing any good to our children.
That was one of the problems in the Asian countries, that they were forcing everyone to go to a public school, and they were requiring that the public school be the only one to feed them. So in, I can't even remember which Asian country it was, they were feeding the children dolphin meat. Well, you know, the mercury causes lots of problems in humans. And so it took the government officials to say no. We're not going to participate in this. The laws had already passed, but government officials started pulling their own children out and standing up and refusing with their own children in order to reverse the process. But that's, you know, the nutrition of your children. You know, what about religious exemptions? What about medical exemptions? All of those things. Or what about just plain old differences in diet? If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, or if, you know, whatever the case may be. Those kinds of, there's no one size fits all for something like nutrition. And you're absolutely right. If you don't rail against it, they will continue to move the goalpost a little bit further and a little bit further until you have no choice at all. So fighting for your individual freedoms at every single level, every single time that they're being threatened is necessity. It's a necessity for people around the world.
It's
and
crucial.
I think more people, yes, it's crucial. I think that more people are starting to really realize this and take action. I hope that more people in European countries and in, you know, Western civilization, you know, Australia and New Zealand will really start to, you know, pull back some of the progressive ideas that we should be some sort of globalized society where everyone has the same. If everyone has the same, we're all going to be at the bottom. And do we want that? I don't think that we do.
Exactly. That's what happened in our country. You know, we were unequal because we had a free market. Some people, they are doing well. They were doing well because they had money or they had invested their time, their lives in their business, building up their own wealth. But when Chavez and then Maduro came into power and they implemented socialism, they reached equality or equity. We were all poor.
Right.
Or at the same level of poverty. So it might seem for many people that genuinely believe in some sort of social justice or that we should have a more distributed wealth. Some people genuinely believe that, but that's not reality. That's not how it works.
Right.
And here you're mentioning European countries, the UK, they closed the clinic. They had a clinic for transitioning, and
Have a,
Sweden, Finland, many countries are pulling back. But
yeah.
what is shocking is that while those countries are pulling back, Spain is going all the way forward. And recently they passed a law, so-called trans law. And that law states that children between 12 and 16 are able to undergo sex reassignment surgery. I refuse to believe that children in those age groups are capable of making such decision. What's your take on this? What's your opinion on this?
Well, we banned it in Texas. I live in Texas, and we banned it in Texas. And all of the southern, southeastern states in America have banned it. But I will say this: it's not just the minor children who are not capable of making such a decision. The idea that someone who is suffering from some sort of mental health crisis has the capacity to make a life-altering decision like that is, to me, that's criminal. I also find lawyers for detransitioners, and one of the men who got in contact with me, he lives in Finland, but he got his wrong sex hormones from a clinic in Arizona 2 weeks before he moved to Finland. And the man was going through a midlife crisis. He's an adult, but he was suffering from a psychological problem. And so their solution was to give him a poison for his body to remedy a problem with his mind. To me, it's cruel. It's cruel, and it turns people into lifelong patients, medical and psych patients. It doesn't help them. We should be affirming the reality of our lives, not affirming some delusion. We don't allow people to undergo a tummy tuck or some sort of gastric bypass surgery if they're severely anorexic, if they're suffering from anorexia. We don't do that. So why in the world are we allowing people who do not have the mental capacity to make such a decision? Why are we allowing them to do that as a medical prescription? And children cannot consent. In parts of California, you can get gender reassignment surgery as a teenager, but you're not allowed to drink alcohol, or you're not allowed to get a tattoo. Like, they understand that getting a tattoo is something that's too permanent for a child to make that decision, but they think that giving them wrong sex hormones and amputating their breasts is a reasonable decision for a child. I don't think so. It's not just it's an unreasonable decision, and it's an irrational decision for a child to make. And it is also an irrational decision for an inappropriate decision for someone who is suffering from severe mental anguish or mental issues to make that decision to permanently alter their bodies and ruin what is a perfectly healthy body to begin with. We should be teaching these people how to live comfortably in their skin and how to navigate, give them coping skills, which is another thing that we don't teach anymore. Give them avenues to help them to accept who they are and live freely within their own skin. Instead, we're telling them that they're born in the wrong body and allowing them to inject themselves with poisons and amputate perfectly healthy body parts. It's insane. I don't think that history will look kindly on the people who are allowing this. I have been calling for criminalization of medical professionals who perform these mutilation surgeries. I think that it is predatory. It's predatory on the youth. It's predatory on their parents, who also are, who, in my experience, the majority of the parents who are being told that this is the only way, they're also being manipulated, and they're being blackmailed into accepting this. You know, the people that you see on TikTok who are, you know, suffering from Munchausen's by proxy and doing this to their children and want to achieve fame and all of that stuff, those parents are a small minority of parents who are affirming. There are a lot of parents out there who don't agree with this, but they're being forced to by the government. And I think that should be criminal. And our legislators have started to stand up and pay attention to what's going on here. And I think that around the world, everybody is at a different place, you know, in the method, in the methodology of all of this. So, you know, Spain is a little bit more behind in their understanding of what's going on, but exposing what's happening and showing people, you know, explaining the Cass report, that was what closed down Tavistock in the UK. You know, I was called to a roundtable in Florida with doctors and other parents and other detransitioners to explain what happened to us, what our stories were, by the Surgeon General of Florida. And Florida was one of the first states to really take action against gender affirming care. So I think that the more parents, the more people, the more detransitioners that speak out in other countries, they will ultimately have to make this determination, because it is so dangerous. We've always had transsexuals, but those transsexuals made a decision, a choice, because that was just something that they wanted to do. It wasn't a prescription for a mental illness. It wasn't a prescription for a child suffering from body dysmorphia, a prepubescent child that, you know, liked to play with dolls if he was a little boy, or liked to play with cars because she was a little girl. It's become completely and totally distorted and a criminal, in my view, a criminal predation on society.
That is really sad. And I think all those doctors, surgeons, psychologists, and psychiatrists who are part of this, they should be put in jail, and they have to be held accountable. This cannot be left alone. You know, we have to make sure that they all pay, because what they're doing is they're sterilizing healthy children. They are removing healthy organs, healthy parts of their body in the name of compassion. We have the case of a girl who about 5 or 6 years ago, she was transitioned here. Her uterus was removed. She was put into hormones. Her breasts were cut off. And now she's filing a lawsuit against the healthcare of the Galicia region. So this is criminal. This is beyond criminal. I think this is a total war against God creation, because they're saying you have the wrong body. And the way to fix that is to chop off parts of your body and give you this poison. But regardless of the number of surgeries you undergo, if you're a man, you will ever be a man forever. Your organs, your cells, every part of your body is a man. And if you're a woman, regardless of all the surgeries you undergo, and with women who believe or are made to believe they're men, it is sickening, the pictures of so-called phalloplasty, where they attach a non-functioning so-called penis removing part of the forearm or their thigh, and it's horrible. It's horrible. They get complications.
It's nightmare inducing. I mean, you know, I can't even look at the pictures anymore, because like I said, I find lawyers for detransitioners. And, I am left, sobbing in a puddle on the floor while I'm trying to call a lawyer after I've spoken with a detransitioner, because, it's the stuff of nightmares, listening to these things. And, the therapists and the medical professionals have really, they've really violated their own oath of first do no harm. And one of the things that I do at affirmingreality.com is I try to help parents with resources for therapists for their children and for their families, so that they will get the proper assessment. I try to encourage them to seek help from professionals that are going to follow their oath of first do no harm. So, and I think, the lawfare is going to be instrumental, because a lot of the times people won't stop doing something until it hits them in the wallet. And I'm very happy to see that there are people in Spain who are fighting against this, the detransitioners who have suffered just untold harm from these gender affirming surgeries. It's criminal, and I hope that young woman's lawsuit is successful, and I hope that more detransitioners will speak up. I hope that more female athletes will come forward and speak up. I hope that more legislators and government officials will start putting definitions of male and female in their laws, so that there is never, ever a question anymore as to who can be called male and who can be called female. These are the things that we're doing in America, and they are doing in some of the other European countries. But I do hope, for Spain's sake, that more people speak out, because that is the only way that this is going to stop, is if everybody says, no, we're not doing this.
That's right. And if we come together, more and more people come together, then we will be able to fight this back and make sure that this ends as soon as possible. So if you are a parent and you're watching this, or if you have a relative who is suffering from this pandemic, it's a pandemic, so-called gender dysphoria, please share this video and share Gabrielle's website, affirmingreality.com. I want to thank you so much, Gabrielle. Before we end, can you please share your social media accounts and your website, so everyone who wants to reach out, who is in need of this type of counseling and coaching to address this issue, can reach out?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter, at Gabs Clark 5. I'm also Getter and True Social at Gabs Clark 5. I have everything, most of everything is on my Twitter, but you can also reach out to me at affirmingreality.com. And there's a button to send me an email if you'd like to send me an email there. I do everything that I can. Basically, most of what I do is volunteer. And so I do accept donations at Buy Me a Coffee at Gabs Clark 5. So, but most of what I do, I do as volunteer work. You can also find a webinar, my webinar, at Actively Unwoke. Actively Unwoke has my webinar, Affirming Reality, and it's $20. It's a 3-hour long webinar, but you really do get a lot of information, and a lot of parents have already been able to successfully help their children desist just by watching that webinar. So there is help out there. And you can reach out to me again on Twitter or at affirmingreality.com.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Let me ask you something a little bit personal. Are you a religious person?
I am an atheist, but I do engage in Judeo-Christian traditions. So yes, but I will say, even as an atheist, I understand that this is a spiritual war. They're trying to take the souls of our children, and trying to disassociate them from real belief, a belief in something. I think a lot of atheists have come to the decision that it might not have been such a good idea to teach people that there's no reason to believe in anything. Um, the lack of belief is not freedom. The lack of belief is despair. And so I do understand, and I teach my parents, hey, listen, if you have a religious belief, go to church. If you have a religious, even with my own daughter, we went to church. We went to church, and just so that she could see that there's community, that there's hope, that you don't have to believe in nothing. If there is something to believe in, then you should embrace that. And some of my parents, they have started, they have dedicated themselves to their religions and to their churches and mosques and synagogues, because they understand that they have to give their children something to hold on to.
That's right. And I think one of the reasons why these groups, these so-called progressive groups and leftist extremists are so against religions and Christians mostly, it's because the Bible says it very clearly. I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible is the word of God, and God created humans in his image, and he created them female and male. I believe part of these things that we have seeded is our belief and the fear of God. If these people fear God and they believe that there is a reason to act well on life, to have a righteous life, they wouldn't be doing all of these things. But the government and many people, we took away God from our schools, from our society, and we replace it or try to replace it with something else, entertainment, celebrities, and this cannot take God's place. So do you mind if I pray, I make a quick prayer with you?
Please do.
Okay. Father, I want to thank you for this wonderful time with Gabrielle. I want to thank you for her courage and her bravery to step up and speak out against this evil doing that we are facing today. Our children, our youth, our teens, they are being confused. I want to thank you for her life. I want you to bless her family and bless her work. She's doing so much. Although she is not a believer, she's strongly fighting against this. And I thank you for that, God. I know we are fighting in all levels. We're fighting in the spiritual realm, and we're fighting in the lawful realm. Father, I want to thank you for her life, for her experience, for everything that she's learned. I think you have been guiding her, and now that she's sharing this with other parents who are facing this terrible, terrible pandemic, I want to thank you for that, Lord. I want you to bless her family, and bless her work. I want you to continue encouraging her so that she can continue with her work. She can continue sharing this and speaking out. Father, I want to thank you for her life. I want you to bless her family. And I really thank you for allowing me to have this time with her. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. Thank you very much. I hope we can meet some other time. And the reason why I'm doing this in my channel and as many others is because we need to speak up. We need to speak against this. We need to share all this, because if we don't, we're going to lose this battle, and it's not going to be the best scenario for us. So I really thank you for taking the time, for joining me for this interview, and I will be posting this within a week. The final edited version will be available for your usage. And please share some closing remarks.
I will say this. I think that the people should be the ones to dictate how they live, not an ideology. They should, and certainly not the government. I would encourage the men of our society to do what it is in your nature to do: protect and provide. Protect society. And you don't need women's permission to do that, right? The women are protecting the children. They're doing their best in a lot of situations. But we need more men to start speaking out. We need more men to start to stand up and protect society, because we're in a war and we need warriors. We need warriors to protect us. So I encourage every man to start engaging in this fight and engaging in this battle, and putting your voices, putting your presence, putting your dollars, all of those things where they're going to be the most effective. Protesting, speaking out, voting with your dollar. All of those things are necessary in order to fight this Marxist ideology that's taking over our world. So with that, I think we can win if everyone does their part.
That is true. Those are wise words, and we should not only fight, but we should get educated so that we can learn how to fight, how to address each of these issues.
Right.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. I want to thank you, and hopefully we can have another talk in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this interview, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel, as it helps a lot. Thanks for watching.